I saw God do something wonderful, so now I'm programmed to expect a miracle.
Now you're broadcasting from the top of the world to the bottom and all the way around.
I'll heal you up. You've been hurt because of what you did. I'll restore your heart. I'll make you whole again, and then I'm going to prosper you again.
You can have your opinions and your preferences, but your preferences will not define my self-worth.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Faith in the Morning. I'm so glad you tuned in today. I believe something good is going to happen to you today, so expect miracles. Faith in the Morning is our 15-minute broadcast on part of the Faith Plus network. Faith in the Morning exists to help you start your day with faith and encouragement. And Faith Plus, this network exists to help stream faith to this generation. So thank you for tuning in. If you're watching on social media, go ahead and share so other people can be encouraged by what we share today. One of the things that we've done on this broadcast, we've gone through Mark chapter 11, and then we started a verse-by-verse study of Hebrews chapter 11. To get the context of Hebrews chapter 11, we actually started in chapter 10, and we walked through several verses. But then we paused that study in that explanation so that we can address some current events and how to address those things from the standpoint of faith. And so we've talked about how not to be hopeless in this time, how to choose hope. We talked about how it's okay to be angry, but how to deal with justified anger and not stay in that place of anger. We talked about figuring out where you are with your emotions and figuring out where you are in this whole process and knowing that it's okay to feel how you're feeling, but just don't stay there, but go forward. We talked about being peacemakers and how being peacemakers is not calling for calm. A peacemaker addresses the root of the issue. It doesn't just deal with unrest. It deals with what caused the unrest and things in the system that has to be addressed. Because peace, what the Hebrew word shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken. It's the peace that comes from being a whole. So we address the problem so that the situation can be dealt with entirely, not by the fruit, but also dealing with the root. So we talked about those things, but we've also had some wonderful conversations with Pastor Evan Black. We've had conversations with Pastor Kylie Gatewood, Brother Jimmy Gatewood. We've had great conversations with Pastor Josh Clemens, and we have some other conversations that are coming up that I know you guys will enjoy. But one of the things that I want to share with you and kind of reiterate is one of the things that's going to take to go forward is simply conversations. Now, I want to read this to you from Colossians chapter 4, verse 6. The King James says it this way: Let your speech always be great. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. The New Living Translation says, let your conversation be gracious and attractive, so that you have the right response for everyone. The New American Standard says, let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you know how you should respond to each person. Now, we have to watch how we talk to each other. Because one of the things is, some people were always bad at this, but some people have devolved in their conversation skills because been sheltering in place and all people have is social media. And so they've been type in, they become Twitter warriors and social media warriors, and they type in all these things, and you're not understanding. Well, sometimes they're talking to bots, and so they don't realize they're talking to a computer. But other times you're actually talking to another person. And we've lost that human interaction because we forget who we're talking to. And we have to understand that our conversation, whether it's verbal, or whether it's via over FaceTime, or whether it's via social media, we're talking to people, and we're still kingdom representatives. And so, as Ephesians 4 says, we're to speak the truth in love. Not just speak the truth. Well, I told them the truth, Pastor. Well, that's great, but you only did half of it. You must speak the truth in love. So number one about having conversations, because one of the things I want to share today is how to have a conversation, not just a general conversation like, hi, how you doing? How to have a conversation about race and racial reconciliation. Number one, speak the truth in love. I'm a person that, I've been involved with the conversation, not just since things have happened. I've had various conversations my entire life over this, but especially somehow since college. I remember we would have different things that happened on campus. And one of my jobs became to hold forums, to hold discussions on what was going on in the world and dealing with current events. And when different things happened, some of those conversations were about race. And so one of the things we did on Instagram Live a number of weeks ago, myself and one of my great friends, Pastor Kerrick, one of my closest friends in the world, we got in front of the camera on Instagram Live to talk to each other the way we talk in person. And so what people began to see is the way we communicate and the things we talked about. And the things is like, well, everything we're seeing now, I remember our mentor, Bishop Butler, both took us with him to Brazil in 2013. And this was during the Trayvon Martin case. This was when the person who killed him was on trial. And we were in Brazil and we were talking about that case. And I told him that if this case turns the way, which it actually did, we're heading to riots, we're heading to this. I listed the things that are going to happen. And the thing is, we saw it a little bit in 2013, but we've seen an increase over the last 7 years. And so we've gotten from the camera and had a conversation so that people can learn from the conversation and hopefully model the conversation. And one of the things, if you're going to have a conversation like that, you have to speak the truth in love. That's number one. But you also have to understand, because there's some people who say, well, it's not my job to educate people. It's not my job. Well, no, there's some truth to that. It's not your job to educate people. But number two, one of the things I understand as a leader, as a pastor, what Paul says to Timothy and Titus is that we should be apt to teach. So there's some things that may not be your specific job to do, but it's something I have to do as a leader in the house of faith. But also, you have to understand, you can't let that be a cop-out for you. That just because it's not your job to educate people, that you don't have the conversation. They say, well, they should already know. You would be surprised how much people don't know. I know we have some history teachers and some educators who watch this every day, and they could verify if they watch social media. There are a lot of stuff that people just don't know for whatever reason, or they were taught wrong. And so I was on a broadcast recently, and I said, and I encourage them, I'm having this conversation, but a good teacher doesn't just give you all the information. They start you on the process so you can better yourself and educate yourself. They give you the tools necessary and point you in the right direction. So I was on a broadcast and I shared a lot of things that most people would not realize. And then I pointed in the right direction. And I told them, I said, you need to make sure you're actually studying. I said, not the history books that have cleaned up everything, not the history books that have removed everything, but the books that actually tell the whole story. And sometimes you might have to look at multiple books to get the whole story. So number one, speak the truth in love. And number two, you have to be willing to have the conversation. Don't hide from it. You say, well, it's uncomfortable. Yeah, it is uncomfortable. So that means you may not always have to have the conversation immediately. With certain recent events, I know different things happen. Maybe some of you experience the same thing. Then, my phone started blowing up. People started texting me, all this other stuff. And some answers I didn't have in the moment. And some were like, well, let me take some moment and process what I'm going through before I respond. So what I'm saying, number three, not every question requires an immediate response. You can say, you know what, I'm not going to talk about that right now, but I'll get back to you. Even when you have the conversation, still be uncomfortable, where there are times where our faith calls us to be uncomfortable. Then I'll remind you of this verse we read, before we bring this to a close, and we'll continue more along this line tomorrow. Let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you'll know how you should respond to each person. So speak to the truth in love. Be willing to have the conversation. Find out where you are on this end. And then you might be on another side of this. So you're not the one doing the speaking. You're the one who needs to do the learning. So what you do is you actually listen. You do what James says, be swift to hear and slow to speak. And if you're the one listening, don't deflect. One of the things that helped share this on a broadcast, I said, too many times when this situation is brought up, the race and injustice and systematic issues are brought up, deflections are made. And people deflect and they'll say stuff that is just ludicrous and asinine, that it's just not true, but because it's been peddled by so many different organizations, they think it's actually a fact. But one of the things I would point out, I said that is deflection. You're not open up to hear the truth. You're not open to learn. You're just really to reply to make sure that you don't feel guilty because of what you've seen and what you refuse to address. And then as we close, I'll leave you with just this one, and I'm out of time already, that when you're having this conversation, do not find someone, go look for someone who agrees with your views, who doesn't look like you, so you can say, well, I don't have an issue with my views or my actions. Because the thing is, you're not looking to learn. You're not looking to change. You're not looking for reconciliation. What you're doing is looking to justify yourself. And that reminds me of Jesus in the Gospels when he had the conversation with the man, when Jesus was talking about loving your neighbor. And the man was kind of convicted by the answer. And so he was trying to justify himself. This is the language the King James used. Seeking to justify himself. He said, well, who's my neighbor? And then Jesus told the wonderful story of the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan. What the story at its root was targeting the racial strife that existed in the Jewish world at that time. So don't seek to justify yourself in the conversation. If you're coming from a point of listening, listen. Seek to understand. Show the brotherhood that's needed, the sisterhood that's needed, that fact that you're understanding. Admit that you don't know everything. And the thing is, sometimes you just have to admit you're wrong. And that's okay. Just grow from it. But conversations need to be had on a major level, but also on a small level. Because some people will take this issue and put it in just one sector of society when it's actually all throughout society. So for it to go forward beyond just being a trending topic, but to address things in education and banking and finance and things in the media and things in the government, to address all those things that's going to take time to address, it's going to take conversations. It's not going to be solved with an election. And although I believe in protest and I believe in praying, it's not going to be solved with one protest. This is something that is not a sprint. It's a marathon. And you can keep it going, yes, through your prayers, but also be willing to have conversations. Speak the truth in love. Don't back away. Let your speech always be seasoned with grace, like you are seasoning some food. And the thing is, this food, this conversation, your speech has to be seasoned. Now, don't have any bland food. We're not talking about bland food. I'm talking about seasoned food. That's what your speech has to be like. This is the conversation you have to have. And the thing is, if you're a believer, you've been given the ministry of reconciliation. So we have to engage. We have to lead the way. This is the church's finest hour. It's not time for us to become cultural ostriches, put our head in the ground and wait for Jesus to come back. No. We have to lead the way. We have to have the conversation. So one of the things I encourage you to do today, take some time to pray. God, how should I have this conversation? And who should I have it with? Open the door for me to have the conversation. Grant me the words to say. Help my speech be seasoned with grace, and help me to speak the truth in love so that I can make a difference, even if it's one person at a time. Love you so much. Thank you for tuning in. And sometimes a faith lifestyle, you display your faith by the conversation you have with others. For it's by our faith we overcome the systems of the world, and our faith is fueled by love. Love you so much. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.